Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to Kapowski Reads, and this is my November wrap-up. First though, I am somewhere different. I am in the most Christmassy room ever. I'm staying with my parents just now for a little pre-Christmas visit, and I have Fred and this guy has no name and all of these Christmassy little toys. So I'm ready for November to be done. So November was a little bit of a slumpy month, but still I managed to get through 11 books, which worked out as 3,066 pages, which is maybe 2/3 of what I would normally get through. So I think I have to take that as a win. And my most read genres were mystery, because I did my week of reading murder mysteries, which made me so happy, and horror. I think maybe that's just picking up the last of my October reads, maybe? Or maybe I'm just reading more horror right now. And then my second most read genres, again, another tie, were classics, LGBTQIA+, thriller, fantasy and crime. Big old mix and quite evenly spread, so that's quite good. And an average star rating of 3.64, which is amazing. And again, slightly helped by the fact that I did a reread of Dracula, which is an automatic 5 stars for me. And that probably, it definitely helped raise my average, but I'm not worried about that because it's only one reread, whereas previously there were quite a few and that did heavily skew my average rating. I want to say 4 books that I loved, but one was a reread. So let's just take it that I read Dracula and I loved it, because I love it every time I read it. So let's chat about the other books that I loved. The first one was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and this was just a beautifully written story that was heavily fantasy, and it all surrounded these magic cards, which unusually was the second book that I read this month featuring cards, because I also read The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, although I didn't really enjoy that, but I did enjoy One Dark Window. I absolutely loved the characters in this book. I loved the world building. I loved the magic system. I felt like it was just really perfectly explained. I knew the rules, I knew the risks, and that's something that I find is so hard to find in a new fantasy series. So I was just utterly impressed. I didn't have really any expectations going in other than, oh, it's fantasy, female lead, I hope I love it. And just expectations were definitely reached and surpassed, and I just thought it was an absolute joy to read. Goodreads has got this as being book number 1 of the Shepherd King series, and let me tell you now, I want book number 2. I want book number 2 right this minute, but it does not exist, so I cannot have book number 2, but I would love it. I have spoken about this book in a previous vlog, so any books that I've already mentioned, I will pop links in the description to their videos, because I don't want to drone on and on about books that I've loved. I do want to drone on and on about books that I've loved, but I'm not going to. The last thing I'm going to say about this book before I move on to the next one is that the chapters were set out beautifully. Each chapter started with a card from the magic system and a little bit of sort of lore of the history surrounding that particular magic card, and that just added an extra little bit of enjoyment, and I just thought it was just beautifully written and beautifully presented. Next up was The Gloaming by Kirsty Logan, who I have read and loved before. This was another book that was kind of like a fairy story, and it was another beautifully written book. Kirsty Logan's writing is very lyrical and almost sort of dreamy. I absolutely loved, again, the world building in The Gloaming. I loved the flashbacks to the history of Mara and of Mara's parents as well. my wee heart broke at numerous points during this book. I just found myself loving the characters and just growing so attached to them and wanting only nice things for them. And when not nice things happened, I took it very personally because I just really loved them. And it was such a quick read as well. I thought it was just utterly beautifully written. It was so atmospheric, and it's set in a wee island off the coast of Scotland, and I just thought it was beautiful. There was something just so enchanting about this book. The world, it was our own, but it also just felt so otherworldly, with the island almost being personified and the sort of fate of those who remained on the island being kind of cemented as they would go to the cliffs and turn into rock. I just thought that was just so interesting, and I kind of would have liked a little bit more about whether that happened in the rest of the world or if it was just this island, which really just felt like a character in itself. My last top rated book of this month was Ginger and Me by Elissa Soave. This was my Scottish Book Club pick for October, November, or maybe November, December. I get really confused about the months because it's 2 months. But I loved this. Another just lovable character who I just wanted to hug. I really loved Wendy. She just was a wee lonely soul, and I loved the way that Ginger just made her come out of her shell and just start finding some joy in her life that had previously only really been about her work, which was driving a bus. But she loved driving her bus. She loved her customers and they loved her. But it was really just beautiful seeing Wendy do something for herself. I really loved the way that this book was actually very creepy, but I didn't realise that while reading it. It was only afterwards that I started thinking about it, when I was thinking about writing a review for the book, that I realised how Wendy's sort of lack of boundaries and awareness was just actually quite terrifying. And poor Diane, I felt so much for Wendy, and I loved the way that this book instantly set me up for excitement, with the book starting with Wendy in prison. And so you just spend the whole book wondering what she did that got her arrested, because she's just a wee soul. She wouldn't hurt anybody, and for her to be in prison, you just sort of think, well, what did you do? And that just really it was so compelling. I just wanted to keep reading, and I wanted to know what Wendy did. I didn't see any of the twists surrounding Wendy coming, and I thought that that was really brilliant, because I don't want to guess the twists. It does make me feel smug when I do, but I don't want to. And I really enjoyed this book. Really made me think. It made me work hard. It made me work hard for my enjoyment, but I thought it was beautiful. And I really enjoy books about characters. Like, Wendy was a character. She just felt so realistic. This is another book where my heart absolutely broke at numerous points. I just felt so much for the characters. I loved Wendy, I loved Ginger, and again, I only wanted good things for them. And I was so worried that maybe bad things were going to happen to them. I knew Wendy was going to go to prison because that was on page 1 of the book, and I felt just so tense for the characters that I just grew to love so quickly. While I did, absolutely have some heartbreak during this book, there were so many points of hilarity, and it was so witty and funny. And Wendy was she didn't mean to be funny some of the times. Sometimes I think she maybe did, but it just made me laugh and it made me smile, and it was a beautiful wee friendship. And the last book I'm going to talk about, it wasn't one of my highest rated books, but it was still sort of in the middle, high-ish of the middle. I really liked it. I just didn't love it. But I do want to acknowledge it because it's something that's so out of my comfort zone, and I enjoyed it. So let's talk about it. Urbanshee by Siaara, Freeman. This was a collection of poetry, and I don't read a lot of poetry. I believe this is my second collection of poetry read this entire year, and that could also be the second collection of poetry I've read this decade, maybe. I just don't think that poetry is something I automatically reach for, but I might have to reach for it a little bit more often because I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this collection. It was described as a sort of retelling of fairy tales and mythology through a modern gaze. It's a collection of poetry which is pretty much surrounding what it means to be Black in the USA. Again, utterly beautifully written. That is the theme for this month. The theme for November is fewer books, but all wonderfully written, so that's excellent. This poetry collection was utterly heartbreaking. It was raw. It was just, the author had just sort of opened up her soul and put it on the page for others to read, and just, oh, I cried a lot. Again, I cry at most books. I cried at this collection too. And I know barely anything about critiquing poetry. I haven't critiqued poetry since I was in high school, which I left in 2004. So I'm not going to even try to give any sort of critical analysis of poetry. It's not what I do. All I can just say is how the collection made me feel, and it made me feel intensely. A various collection of emotions. It made me just angry. It made me sad. It made me hopeful. And I thought that even though the subject matter was very heartbreaking at a lot of points, again, a theme for November was books that made me have a wee broken heart. I'll have to read some more joyful books in December. I just thought it was an absolute joy to read, and I really enjoy reading books about other people's life experiences that are different to my own. I am from a very small town in the south of Scotland, so my knowledge of growing up surrounded by gun violence is nil. So it was very eye-opening because I only really knew about what I'd read in the news, and it was really a thought-provoking collection, and my wee heart broke. And I thought it was just so vulnerable, so raw, and hauntingly beautiful. I thought it was a stunning collection, and I will definitely be looking out for more poetry or even fiction from this author. So that is everything, and I would love to know, no it's not, I forgot my favourite book. So my favourite book of November was Ginger and Me, because I finished it a wee while ago and I haven't stopped thinking about it. I just love the characters oh so much, and it just really just got me in like my wee soul, and I loved it, and I'm so excited to talk about it. I would love to know what your favourite book was of the month. Please let me know in the comments if you want to share. And I am now off to go on a wee day trip, and I'm very excited about it. So thank you for watching. Bye!